City Council is called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Alderman Edwards. Alderman Simpson.
Here.
Alderman Turner.
Here.
Alderman Lesko.
Here.
Alderman Canman.
Here.
Alderman Jobe.
Here.
Alderman McMiniman.
Here.
Alderman Tylen. Alderman Dove.
Here.
Alderman McDonough.
Here.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the December 9th Committee of the Whole meeting?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes. Are there any requests for presentations tonight? Let's move to item 5 on the agenda, ordinances tabled or remaining in committee. They are 2012-123, 2013-174, 376, 397, 2014-085, and 2014-293. Are there any requests to move those ordinances from the table status? If not, let's move to item 6 of the agenda, ordinances for committee consideration.
First item is 2014-454, an ordinance amending Chapter 34, Section 34.42 of the 1988 City of Springfield Code of Ordinances as amended, pertaining to the Foreign Fire Insurance Board.
Move to consent.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for consent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-455 is an ordinance amending Chapter 110 of the 1988 City of Springfield Code of Ordinances as amended by adding Article 19 to Section 110-901 through 110-917 regarding Transportation Network Company services.
Move for consent. Second.
There's a motion for consent and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, I think this is a great measure. It expands the free market by creating more competition and giving local transportation consumers more choices. In short, I think it's good for our citizens and good for the visitors to our city. There was only one thing that I was a little concerned about, and that's in section 110-908, subsection D, where if there's an accident, the drivers are required to provide proof of insurance to other parties involved in the accident. I'd just like to clarify or make it clear that he's also to provide, or she, that information to passengers. And so I've asked Council Greenberg if we could prepare an amendment.
All right.
For next week. All right. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderman Simpson.
I just have a question regarding how is this going to affect the current cab companies, that we have here in Springfield. Will this hurt them at all? I mean, I know it's about competition, but do even the cab services we currently have enough customers to survive? Do you know? Or
Well,
is there a representative here from this company?
Yes, there is.
Recognize Alderman Jobe.
Yes, this is Alderman Simpson. This is a movement I brought to the mayor's office and spearheaded, and obviously we've got a few additional co-sponsors. There is a representative from the company, Uber, who most of us might be familiar with or have heard of the name. They practice in other major cities across the country, in Chicago as well. Mm-hmm. Again, as like Alderman Canman said, it's about consumer choice. It's a job creation company. There's going to be new jobs created. There's going to be new drivers out in the market that are going to provide another service to consumers here in the capital city, and I'm more than happy to invite them up to talk about their company.
But they're not going to be held to the same strict standards that cab companies are held?
Sure, they're going to be licensed, and they have, their drivers go through background checks. They have a, I mean, we're going to put them, I think what's great about this, they could have probably come into a community and operated without us prior approval, so we're being above board, we're putting it in city code, we're creating another section within the code. I think that was upon their recommendation. They approached us first before ever doing business here. They want to be, equal partners to our consumers here in the capital city, and that's why we're adding another section into city code.
Now, how will,
Sorry. Thank you. No. That was an applause. I thought I did a good job.
Mr. Chair, could someone come up and speak to us?
You mind?
Please.
I'll have him introduce himself. And
Please give us your name and your place of residence.
Thank you. My name is Robert Kelman with Uber Technologies. I live in Chicago, grew up there as well. So I have a statement I could read if that clarifies it, or I could just go right into answering the questions if that's
You can read the statement.
it's easiest.
If that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead and read your statement.
Of course. Again, thank you for allowing me time to speak today. Just want to touch on a few of the basic benefits that Uber can bring to a community, including safe driving alternatives and job creation, and then, again, answer any questions you may have. At Uber, we took a very simple idea. Press a button on your phone and get a ride when you need it. And we leverage technological advances to make that a reality. When you request a ride through the Uber app, you're connected to the nearest driver who then has a choice to accept that ride request. When the ride is accepted, the screen displays the driver's name and photograph, the vehicle make and model, the license plate number, and a photograph of the driver, so that riders know who is picking them up ahead of time. Riders can use the app to estimate the fare by entering in their destination, and payment is done through the app, so there is never a need to exchange cash. At Uber, safety is our top priority, so each of us is challenged to build a safer experience for both riders and drivers every single day. Uber engineers built tools inside the app to help riders feel safe. The Share Your ETA function, just for example, allows a rider to send their ETA to a loved one, and that person can actually see the car in progress, map it along the route, and make sure that the person arrives safely at their destination. We partnered with Mothers Against Drunk Driving earlier against this year, and studies have shown that in cities where Uber has launched, there's been a corresponding 10% decrease in DUIs. And we recently announced a new initiative where for every ride given on New Year's Eve, we'll be donating $1 to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and we expect to give about 2 million rides this New Year's Eve. So when it comes to background checks, Uber continues to put safety first. We use a nationally accredited third party called Hirees that performs local, county, multi-state, and federal criminal background checks that go back 7 years for every potential driver. We also use Social Security Trace, cross-check the National Sex Offender Registry, and review DMV driving record reports. We have a zero-tolerance policy for any past history of DUIs or other offenses. Uber's commitment to safety continues, again, with our end-to-end insurance coverage so that riders are protected from the moment an operator is available to receive a ride request until the moment that rider safely exits the vehicle. Ride-sharing, like other industries, in what is often called the shared economy, increases the efficiency of an underutilized resource, the automobile. The Uber platform occasionally makes that personal vehicle into a commercial one. And because we can now determine exactly when that commercial activity is taking place, we can make the operating cost of a vehicle for hire much more efficient. Uber offers $1 million of commercial insurance from the moment the app connects a driver with the rider until the moment that they drop that rider off. That is 3 times the amount of insurance carried by taxis in the state of Illinois. During the period when the driver has the app on, but before they may have accepted a ride from the passenger, a period when many of our drivers might not even be in their car. They might just be at home looking to see if there is demand for cars out there. We have an insurance policy that is more than double the Illinois minimum, and that is in effect. There is no point when Uber's insurance does not cover the rider and driver. And finally, I just want to touch on some of the incredible benefits Uber provides to communities where we operate. Because driver partners can set up any schedule they prefer, we're offering entrepreneurial opportunities for thousands of people with flexible hours. And these are parents whose kids are in schools, or returning veterans, people in between jobs, or entrepreneurs who save up while they work to build their business. We expect that our entry into Springfield will result in an almost immediate additional 100 jobs here in the city. Many of our drivers are part-time. And to illustrate it, is a woman who actually lives on my street who's an Uber driver. She's a mother of two, and after she gets her kids ready and drops them off at school, she turns the app on and drives while they're at school. She turns the app off, goes to pick them up at around 3 o'clock every afternoon, take them to respective sports and music practices, turns the app back on when she drops them off, continues working, continues making money. When she goes back and picks them up, she turns the app off. She goes home. And what she is most proud of, what she loves Uber for, is that she can go to work every day, make money, support her family, and her kids are actually none the wiser. They don't know that she's been to work. She is there supporting her family. So every month, Uber adds 50,000 new drivers to our platform just like her. And here in the United States, the company is committed to helping 50,000 veterans join our platform as drivers this year. So in closing, Uber appreciates that you've taken an interest in ride sharing. We see this as an opportunity to put into place a regulatory framework that works for these exciting and emerging new technologies. At Uber, we're supportive of reasonable requirements for transportation network companies that ensure rider safety, adequate insurance, and driver vehicle inspection requirements. The most important thing we can urge the committee here today is that the technology and business model developed by companies like Uber necessitates a new regulatory framework that doesn't necessarily look like the transportation regulations of the last 50 years. And we're thrilled to have incredible support from the citizens of Springfield, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and developing the new regulatory model for Uber, and so we can continue operating here and beginning to improve the lives of residents of Springfield. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Who pays for the background check?
We do. It comes out of us. We don't ask the city or the state to do it. We charge a $1 per ride safety fee, and that goes to cover the cost of the background checks, but also driver education to increase safety, as well as features in the app that enhance safety, like the share your ETA function I talked about earlier.
So in terms of the technology, how do you disable someone's app who is undesirable in terms of being a driver? How does that work?
It's actually quite simple. Since we essentially control who is allowed access on as a driver, we can deny access just as easily. I'm not a computer engineer, but the way it has been described to me is it's relatively simple, almost as if it's toggling a switch. So if we, for whatever reason, needed to remove a driver or add on a driver, you simply move the corresponding switch in our computer program.
How do you deal with complaints?
Sorry?
How do you deal with complaints?
Our complaints come in through the app as well, and generally our response time is under an hour for every complaint. We've been holding ourselves to that recently, and it's very important to us, again, to ensure that drivers and riders have a pleasant experience in the back of an Uber vehicle. That is, it's part of our brand, and what we want to do is make sure that everything, whether it's the rider simply was unhappy with the quality of the car or thought it was messy, to other kinds of complaints, are dealt with promptly and in the best way possible. So we try and deal with them within the hour of receiving it.
So if there were seniors, and there are seniors who don't drive and may not want to use taxi cabs, may want to use this service, but they don't have or are not used to using the technology of an app on a phone, is the app on the phone the only way that they can access this company?
The app is the easiest way to do it, and if they are using the app to call the vehicle and track their ride and pay for it, it's very easy to you literally just push one little button and you're taken automatically to that screen. There are also a number of email addresses that we've set up that people can use to contact us. So there are multiple venues that we can do. I've also seen there have been riders with recommendations more often than complaints, but they actually go through the driver themselves, who have a very similar way of contacting us. But as they are drivers, they're more familiar with the app. I think the important thing to know is that we are every day trying to make the app easier and better to use, more accessible to various kinds of, to people who are used to using technology in this way or not. Like many other companies out there, our goal in technology is to make it so simple a 4-year-old could do it. And we're making progress on that every single day.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderman Cameron?
Yeah, Mr. Gelman, thank you for coming here today. In the ordinance that's before us, it says that the Transportation Network Company or the TNC driver shall maintain the automobile liability insurance. But in the way Uber does it is the company maintains insurance for all the drivers. Is that correct?
That's correct. So just to be clear, there are, I would say, 2 periods in which we're talking about. There's one period in which the app might be on, but there is no commercial activity taking place. At that point, Uber's insurance policy is a contingent one. It's actually more than twice the Illinois minimum requirement. And that would drop down if there was an incident in that point, that would drop down and cover the incident if there was anything. Our $1 million insurance policy will kick in immediately when that driver is connected to a rider and commercial activity is actually occurring. And that will stay in place until the rider leaves the vehicle.
Okay, now Alderman Simpson asked about the impact on the current taxi cab business in Springfield. Now, I know in Chicago you've been operating for what, how long?
About 2 years.
2 years, and I don't know, the last time I was in Chicago, I saw quite a large number of cabs driving around. Do you know what the impact has been on the
So I don't know numbers, but what we like to characterize Uber as actually not in competition with taxis at all. It's a additional transportation choice available to consumers. My favorite story about this in Texas at the South by Southwest Festival, massive festival, the taxi lines were 2 hours plus long.
in Austin, Texas?
Austin, Texas, yes. Taxi lines were 2 hours plus long, but and taxis could not meet their demand. There simply were not enough taxis. And we did over 100,000 rides that weekend. So what we're finding when Uber comes into a community is that it doesn't so much take away from taxis. What it does is it adds to a consumer's transportation choices, where before a taxi might be either the only way to get around or the only alternative, as in Chicago, to the train. Now there's another alternative that you can do. And what we've seen, and we can map this out, and I can share the maps with you and send them later if you'd like, but that a lot of people will take an Uber to a train, take the train into the city, take the taxis around the city, take the train back out, and then Uber back to their home. And it's actually combined with taxis making cities much more accessible, especially commercial areas and high-density walking areas.
Your remarks about the South by Southwest Festival brought to mind a question of what happens like when you arrive at O'Hare Airport and usually there's a long line of people trying to get cabs. And do you have the ability, does Uber have the ability to go to O'Hare or Midway Airport and pick up passengers like a taxi?
We hope to do that this year. At the moment, we're still talking with the city, and like Springfield, we would like those conversations to progress before we just turn the app on and allow drivers to pick up there. So right now, we actually have a barrier within the app. Even if a driver wanted to pick up and there was a rider at the airport, it's actually not allowed. The app won't let the two meet, so to speak.
Well, with regard to Springfield's airport, if we pass this, would you be able to pick up passengers at Springfield's airport?
I'm not 100% sure if this bill allows it. I know we would love to. I think that would be it would be a big boon to the city of Springfield. People fly in and they're used to using Uber in their respective cities, and when they get off planes, they can just hit the button and have a car waiting for them, ready to risk them off to the museum, the meeting, the hotel. It would certainly ease transportation burdens at the airport, and make things a bit more seamless for everyone visiting Springfield.
Does Corporation Counsel know the answer, or?
Well, I don't see anything in the draft of the ordinance that currently prohibits them going to the airport. Now, the airport itself, though, is a municipal corporation, so if they wanted to enact an ordinance that within the confines of the airport limits was different from this ordinance, they may very well have the ability to do so.
Apparently, there's something in the laws in the city of Chicago that prohibits them from going to airports there. Maybe you could check it out between now and next week and see
Well,
if there's any.
off the top of my head, there's nothing in this ordinance that prohibits them going to the Springfield Airport. However, it's possible the Springfield Airport Authority may have a different opinion, and if so, they have the ability to enact an ordinance that would regulate Uber differently than the city's ordinance.
I was thinking there may be something in our taxi cab ordinance that prohibits people from picking up passengers for hire at the airport. But just a couple more. It's my understanding the way well, first of all, there's a couple other companies besides Uber that are in the transportation network business that I'm aware of, Lyft and Sidecar. Do you know if there's any other companies besides the three? Those three?
There are a couple more I know operate primarily internationally, but those are the big ones here in the United States.
So the way I understand this ordinance is it would allow Uber to operate in other companies, not just Uber, but any company that operates in a similar method or as Uber does. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so.
The way, also it was my understanding that there's no cash that's exchanged. When the ride is finished, the app automatically debits the passenger's credit card or debit card account. Is that correct?
That is correct. We've actually found that it increases driver safety considerably. They're not carrying around any cash like taxi drivers, and it's immediately entered into their account. There's no delays in payment or anything like that.
What about tips? Does the passenger have the ability either with cash or through the app to give a tip to the driver?
With cash, they certainly can if they wanted to, but the Uber fare is meant to be all-inclusive. So all-inclusive of tip, of everything, goes directly to the driver.
Do you know what the practice is? Do most passengers not give tips?
Most passengers do not. Drivers have found they actually, the ones I talked to in Chicago and elsewhere, make more money with Uber than they normally would in a taxi. And so even with the kind of taking tips out of the equation, they are still making very fair salaries.
Alderman Cameron, I wish to allow everyone an opportunity here.
One more, if I could.
One more.
That's it. Just wondering, it's my understanding that you cannot access the service, Uber service, unless you have the app on your phone. Is that correct?
You might actually be able to go through a computer as well. I've never done it, so let me look into that, and I'll get back to you.
Then you'd have to have the app on your computer to do it?
Yeah, you go through the site, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Alderman McDonough?
Thank you, Robert. It's very, very helpful. I think one of the things that we're talking about here is probably very foreign to a lot of folks in Springfield. But like Alderman Canman and others, we've used Uber and others in other cities, and it is extremely convenient. But I do have two quick questions I want to make sure I cover. It relates to some of the things that Alderman Simpson also brought up. Number one, cash is not allowed. I just want to clarify. Cash is not allowed to be given to an Uber driver. Is that correct?
We strongly advise against it.
Except for maybe a tip.
Yeah, for the payment of the fare itself, it is not allowed.
Okay.
Correct.
Secondly, can an individual wave down, certainly can wave down a cab, can they wave down an Uber driver?
No, the only way to call an Uber is through the app itself. So it reduces our drivers looking side to side, looking for fares, reduces congestion, and reduces, we think, significantly distracted driving and the risks associated with that.
So what we've got, as I understand it, and what I've seen anyway, what we've got is a very different way of getting around in a small community like a Springfield, where cabbies are still going to have the ability to pick up their fares by pulling over to the side of the road. They're going to get phone calls into their shop. The first one that gets there typically is the one that's going to get the fare. But in Uber's case, the individual consumer has now another choice, using their own app on their phone or on their computer, if you will. They order, in effect, they tell somebody where they're going to be or where they are, where they want to be picked up, and where they're going to go. And through that transaction, an order has been placed. An individual then enters the car, driver obviously identifying him or herself. During this ride, they're totally covered insurance-wise. That is, any kind of accident that might happen, et cetera, the individuals are covered. And they're covered through the entire ride until payment is made and they leave the vehicle. Correct?
Correct. No, we agree completely. It adds choice to the marketplace and makes it easier for consumers to get from point A to point B, but they are different products, and consumers might choose at different times to hail a taxi or call an Uber.
Great. Thank you. Good job.
Any further discussion?
I just have one question.
Alderman Simpson?
I don't believe, well, maybe it's a statement. Since I've been there almost 20 years, and I've never had a cab stop for me. It's when you hail it, like in Chicago, they don't do that here?
Well,
I don't think they do.
It's unusual, but
I've done that here with the group. But usually when you see a cab and it doesn't have anybody in it in Springfield, they're going to pick somebody up. And that's one of the problems you'll have in Chicago, too.
Yeah.
You'll have in any of the cities. But
Sometimes,
this kind of service
but in
is a little
Chicago, if the light's not on, you can hail them and they'll stop. But I don't know that they do that here. I think you have to call
Yeah, I don't know.
and
I
prearrange a
think-
ride.
yeah.
Any further discussion? There's a motion.
Can I just ask one quick question? What the fee in this ordinance is $500 that the company has to pay a year. Do you know what the fee is in any other cities that regulate transportation companies?
Sam, you and I discussed this offside, and I said we were going to look into that. I
Right.
asked Corporation Counsel
All right, I'll
who
withdraw
made that
the question.
decision. I've already
Withdraw
asked
the
the company representative.
Yeah.
He wasn't.
Okay.
We said that. They didn't.
So there's a motion to place this on the consent agenda, and there's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
Thank you.
2014-456 is an ordinance approving the appointment of Ryan D. Nation and approving the reappointment of Chris Harney to the Springfield Electrical Commission.
Move to consent.
Second.
There's a motion for consent and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-457 is an ordinance authorizing the transfer of funds in an amount not to exceed $1,139,723 for garage consolidation purposes for the Office of Budget and Management.
Move to debate.
Second.
There's a motion for debate and a second. Discussion? I've got a general question for Director McCarty, and we don't need to descend into a real complex discussion of numbers here, but in the big picture of things, during the budget process at the start of the fiscal year, we fully funded the garages for police, fire, public works, and city water, light, and power. And so they each had their fleet maintenance budgets funded in full. And then roughly halfway through the year, or not quite, in July, we passed a supplemental appropriation, which, as I recall, put $4 million into the budget of management and budget. And at that time, the discussion was that, well then, and I think 2 aldermen voted against that supplemental appropriation because we wanted to see the earlier appropriated monies defunded out of public works, fire, police, and city water, light, and power. And we didn't want to appropriate more money until we saw that process. So could you explain how this ordinance fits into that? Because we still don't see monies having been moved back out of those 4 departments.
Sure. I'll try and explain it as simplistically as possible. What we have done is we've created another internal service here, and that internal service is fleet maintenance. Now, what this has done is essentially created a double appropriation. The fund that we operate out of, which you'll see at budget time is a new fund, Fund 17. We're currently using Fund 16, which is where our facilities management is, but Fund 17 will need an appropriation, and out of that fund is where we will pay employee salaries, we'll pay for parts, we'll pay for other overhead that goes into running the fleet maintenance operation. Now, the revenue into that fund has to come from somewhere. It comes from the charges or the bills that are given to the various departments. And in order for those departments to pay those bills to the fleet operation, they must have their own appropriation, hence a double appropriation. So this fits into that, in that what we're doing here is we are moving appropriations. As you indicated, at the beginning of the year, you gave the 4 individual garages a full year's worth of appropriations to operate. That means you appropriated money in their personal services line to pay salaries, in their contractual lines to pay for contractual services, in their fuel lines, commodities, equipment, etc. All the things they needed to run their individual garages. Well, now they no longer need those appropriations in those individual lines. They only need an appropriation in one minor object code, and that's 1806. Hence what you see in the charts that are part of the ordinance. So all of the appropriations that you had originally given them at the beginning of the year are now being moved. What's left and needed for the rest of the year are being moved by this ordinance so that those departments can pay the fleet operation for the bills that they get. The supplemental appropriation that you did in the middle of the year was for the fleet operation fund, Fund 16, so that the fleet could have its budget and take over the employees and start paying their salaries, start paying the contractual costs, start paying NAPA for the parts, etc. So it's two sides to this. The departments have to have an appropriation to pay their bills to the fleet operation, and the fleet operation has to have an appropriation to pay for the expenses associated with running the garage.
At the end of the fiscal year, will the departments of Fire, Police, Public Works, and City Water, Light, and Power have excess monies then in all these accounts that...
Well, as you can tell from what this ordinance does, all of the money, let's try and look at an example here. The police department had approximately 5 to 7 people, I forget how many, working, and they had in their 1100 lines the salaries and fringe benefits for those individuals covered. Now that what's left of the appropriation, what they now need for the rest of the year, those people moved on November 9th over to the fleet operation. So now their salaries are being paid out of what you appropriated mid-year. Okay, but we're doing work for them, and we're doing it on a chargeback basis, which means we have to turn around and keep track of that on a time and material basis, and we will bill the departments. They now need to pay us. Well, they can't pay us out of their 1100 lines. So they need to move the authority that you gave them to the 1800 line so that they can pay the bills that they get. So will there be money left over? Well, money appropriation, it's a matter of perspective. Money and appropriations are two different things. Cash and appropriations are different. But the authority that I think that's what you're referring to, will they have some authority left over? If they do, it'll be in the 1806 line because we're moving everything else from everywhere else to that 1806 line so that they can pay their bills to the fleet operation. And like any other appropriated line that we have, and we have thousands of them, there may be appropriation authority left over at the end of the year. We won't know that until the end of the year.
Well, it's difficult to assess whether we're in budget or outside of budget at this point in time because there's so many funds moving around. Could you make a general comment about that, in your opinion? Are the budget that we approved at the start of the year for the 4 garages, are we remaining within those budget
What
amounts?
I can tell you with regards to the 4 garages, this ordinance is not asking for a supplemental. It's only a legislative transfer, which means there is a zero-sum change. There's no increase, there's no decrease. It's simply moving appropriation authority from some individual lines in the various major object codes to the 1806 line so that they can pay the bills. We have not asked for a supplemental appropriation. So yes, to answer your question, we are within the budgets that you assigned at the beginning of the year in those individual departments.
Any further discussion? So there's a motion to place on the debate, plus and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-458 is an ordinance approving an agreement with Drake, Narup, and Mead, P.C. for Randall A. Mead to provide legal services regarding Sangamon County Court Case Number 2008 L-176, Mary Yarborough individually as a special administrator of the estate of Eric Jones versus City Water, Light and Power and the City of Springfield, and authorizing a payment for an amount not to exceed $50,000.
I'll entertain a motion for discussion on this with the idea that there may be some discussion we wish to have in open session, and later in the meeting we'll entertain a motion to go into executive session to further discuss this agenda item and the next one, and with the idea that we'd then decide whether to place on consent or debate at the end of the once we have finished the executive session portion of the meeting.
Point of clarification, and this is a question for Corporation Counsel. Are there any questions that we can ask in open session relative to?
Well, I would much rather to talk about both this and the next agenda item in closed session rather than open session.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we move this agenda item and the next agenda item to the end of the agenda, and then, go into the executive session at that.
Second.
that point.
Okay, so by the end of the agenda, we're talking about agenda item 10, executive session.
Yes.
And let me, before taking a vote on that, I just want to answer Alderman Simpson's question. I got a couple of questions. I'd just like to know that as to this contract, it looks like Mayor Houston signed a contract back in April of this year, and now we're being asked to approve money for a contract that was signed by the mayor back in April. So a question I have in open session is how much billings have taken place under this contract to this point in time. There's an attachment to the ordinance that shows that there's a offer to provide services made, if I got this right, in March of 2014. So I assume that the services have been made, certain amount of legal services have been made by Mr. Meade from March through today's date. And the question is, how much has been billed to this point in time?
It is less than $25,000. I don't have the exact amount. And the same for the following agenda item involving the Knoll Law Firm. They have not billed more than $25,000 at this point.
Do you know if they've provided services in excess of $25,000? But I don't know how to interpret your question.
I do not believe that they have delivered services and not billed for amounts more than $25,000.
I think with this ordinance and the next one, we have a situation similar to what took place with Attorney Stone, where it appears as though the mayor's office enters into contracts for legal services that will very likely go beyond the $25,000 threshold that requires approval by the city council, and then later in time we're asked to almost ratify something that's already in being, where I think a better practice would be to allow the council to have a say in the retention of the legal counsel at the front end, at the very front end of the decision, instead of ratifying what's already taken place.
I agree with you.
Mr. Chairman, I think if that's the practice, this city council, I mean, we've gone down this, I think when Tim Griffin was Alderman Griffin, he's talked about lowering the threshold of what we approved dollar amounts on. This council's never taken that up, so I guess that's a moot point unless you're going to sponsor an ordinance that would lower that threshold.
I think we may need to consider something like that, Alderman Jobe.
I'm not saying I would support that ordinance. I'm just saying instead of talking about it, you should propose an ordinance pushing it. And we wouldn't have to be dealing with this. I can see the mayor's practice here. I mean, he's trying to do a job and he's allowed to do this under $25,000, and unfortunately these legal costs are going to be more. But I see your point too. If we want to have the front end review, we need to lower that threshold, in my opinion.
Or we can have a mayor that signs a contract and presents it to us at the front end, because I think anyone could anticipate that these fees would very likely go beyond $25,000, particularly a wrongful death case, and which can expose the city to significant hazards, and then the federal case. Any further discussion on that procedural issue?
I think, Mr. Chairman, you make a good point, because at this point, when these attorneys are hired, and I'm not saying making any comment on the quality of either of these lawyers, but at this point, the attorneys have been hired. They're already working on the case. It wouldn't make sense for the city council to say no to this, and we got to get a whole new lawyer, to review the whole case again. So I think it's kind of like, city council really doesn't have much of a choice on it at this point, as just wouldn't make sense to reject these contracts once the attorneys are already into the case. And I think one way or the other, the city council should either be informed, consulted, or maybe city council approval should be required before these contracts are entered into.
And just interjecting with the chair's permission, I think that is probably what we will be doing in the future. Back in March, the collective memory of the office was that the way it had been done in the past is that we would proceed to the extent of the $25,000 and then go to the city council if additional authority was needed. Certainly with the situation that we talked about a couple of months ago, I became aware of the fact that that was not the preference of the city council. And I doubt that we will be doing it in the future for additional cases like this, that, we'll bring it to the city council attention as soon as we can, and it's comparatively rare that we use outside counsel on cases. So I understand the situation. These two cases were already in the process when the discussion was held a couple of months ago on the case involving Attorney Stone.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Thank you, counsel.
Thank you, counsel. So there's a motion to suspend further discussion until after we've gone into executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-460 is an ordinance authorizing payment to Ryan Vogel, an Office of Public Utilities employee, for settlement of a workers' compensation claim for case number 14294E129475.
Move to consent.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for consent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-461 is an ordinance authorizing execution of subrecipient agreement 13 SR 0006 with Helping Hands of Springfield Incorporated for acquisition of property located at 1023 East Washington Street for use as an emergency homeless shelter, utilizing the city's community development block grant funds in an amount not to exceed $215,000 for the Office of Planning and Economic Development.
Move for consent.
Second.
There's a motion for consent and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, just
Alderman Cameron?
question for Director Farmer. And while he's coming up, I noticed the executive director of the Helping Hands is here with us tonight, so I don't know if he wants to address the council, but my question is simply, this is a community development block grant. This is all federal money, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thanks.
Any further?
This is just on this has been a long fight. I know that Helping Hands I think this is the third location that they've tried to locate into, and it's a great organization. They provide a service that's severely needed, unfortunately, to provide shelter to the homeless. And this is a location that I think they finally found that nobody objects to, and is a good location. And I hope we pass this and wish them all the success at their new location.
Thank you. Alderman Cameron, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-462 is an ordinance to decrease the number of Class N liquor licenses by one for GMRI Incorporated, doing business as Olive Garden Italian Restaurant located at 2991 Veterans Parkway.
Move to consent.
Second.
Motion and a second for consent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-463 is an ordinance authorizing execution of a contract with Sellet Travel Services Limited for tourism and trade representation from January 5th, 2015 through December 30th, 2015 for the Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau in an amount not to exceed $75,000.
Move for consent. Second.
There's a motion and a second for consent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-464 is an ordinance authorizing additional funding in the amount not to exceed $100,000 under contract number UE 150302 with Martin Equipment of Illinois Incorporated for maintenance and repair of heavy equipment for a total amount payable of $375,000 for the Office of Public Utilities.
Move for consent.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for consent. Any discussion? I've got one. Alderman Public Works Director, is he still here? I'll pose the questions in...
He is here, Director.
Do you mean
But it's not.
Director Hobby?
Oh, this is past. Never mind. So there's a motion and a second for consent. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're trying to get rid of it.
Motion passes. No,
I'm kidding.
Sweeper question. Yeah, okay. Okay. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
2014-465 is an ordinance authorizing execution of an agreement with Carrollton Bank Trust Number 0113 for annexation of property located at 3949 Spalding Orchard Road.
Move to debate.
Second.
Is there a motion and a second for debate? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-466 is an ordinance annexing certain described real property located at 3949 Spalding Orchard Road.
Move to debate.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for debate. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes.
2014-467 is an ordinance accepting the lowest responsible bid and authorizing the execution of contract number PW 151059 with Key Equipment and Supply Company for the purchase of two 2015 Elgin Pelican P dual street sweepers in an amount not to exceed $376,140 for the Office of Public Works.
Move to debate.
Second.
Motion and a second for debate. Any discussion?
Yes.
Alderman Simpson?
I got a couple of questions. I know you and I met out at 19th and Pine the other day, and some of your other staff, and we talked about the cleaning of the inlets. Would a street sweeper be able to get all of that debris without it going into the outlet, or is that a job that's better done by staff actually on the street and cleaning?
Well, yeah, the street sweeper is going to minimize what staff would have to do. Occasionally, we have to send people out to unclog inlets, but the problem is we don't have enough sweepers. Obviously, we don't have enough manpower really to probably be at the level we should be. We're trying to gradually build that back up. One of our operators is actually even here in the audience can tell you we're down to 2 very old street sweepers, and we're adding 2 more, and we're going to be running 4 of them. And we've looked at possibly doing some contractual during the spring and the fall. Last year, with the bad winter we had, going into the winter starting so early, there's a lot of areas, and he can tell you better than I, that we weren't able to get to, which caused a lot of problems in some areas where we had inlets clogging. So the more proactive, the more aggressive we could be in our street sweeping, the better it's going to serve all those areas.
Okay, and I get that. And when I went, well, actually, I'm from Chicago, so in Chicago, they sweep the streets they're designated. You have to move your car. But then in Chicago, the inlets are not along the curve. The sewers are in the middle of the street, so drainage is to the middle of the street, as opposed to here in Springfield, where the inlets are on the curve, and trash and debris and leaves and you name it gets into that area. And if it's not cleaned regularly, it creates the standing water that is often a concern for residents, especially in older parts of the city, mostly in older parts of the city. And as I look at the design of the street sweepers, the brushes are continually swirling. And are they actually able to get the debris without it pushing it into the inlet? That's my question.
Yeah, well, with effective operators, sometimes it takes 1 or 2 passes. I mean, they can get most of that. Our problem is not having the manpower and the equipment to get there when we should be there. I mean, you have issues in the older parts of the city where you have a lot of trees too. I mean, it's like an endless battle where you're going in some of these areas where the leaves are out there. And then there's an element of personal responsibility on that side too. I mean, there's where we get people that are sweeping into the street doesn't help matters. We try to get back there, but we try to discourage that. We'll cite people if we can, but we encourage people in their homes who can. I mean, there's some people elderly that can't, but if they have inlets, they can help us out by trying to keep those clean as best they can. But there are certain areas where you have the amount of trees, the older trees that we have, you know, at some point in the year, we're going to get a lot in the street, and there's little we can do about that, and we sweep it. And it's effective when we can get there, but it's kind of an ongoing practice.
Okay. If I may continue.
Alderman Simpson.
If this ordinance is passed, when do you expect to get these two pieces of equipment?
We place the order, and we should have them before spring. So it's my
Okay.
understanding early spring.
Okay. Now, I have a question for a director that doesn't deal specifically with this. Should I deal with it now or later?
Will
And
it take
it's
long?
regarding street sweepers,
If it's something we can take care of now, let's go ahead.
if you don't mind. It's come to my attention that two contracts are going to be let or already have been let with regard to street sweepers to UCM and Perry Broughton.
Yeah, we've used Broughton in the past. Traditionally, they have street sweepers. Most of your bigger contractors, what they do is they'll do that when they do some of the prep work on the streets before they do overlay, that kind of work. We've approached them a few times. We never really utilized them, but the fact is we only have two street sweepers. So what we did approach them to really kind of experiment with them up to a certain amount on a contract. And then probably what we would do is go out for an RFP for those services. But those services would only be used, probably what we look at there is most likely in the fall, spring or fall, or if we fall behind to utilize them. It's much more, when you look at the cost effectiveness of going out, we can't afford to go out and get probably 6 to 8 sweepers for the city of Springfield or more, depending. And it makes a lot more sense, you know, with managing our manpower to upgrade for the spring and the fall by utilizing some of those contractual services while maintaining our street sweeping and bringing that back up with more newer street sweepers too.
So these two contracts for just over $14,000, they've already been let?
No,
Or-
well, we can't go over $14,000 a contract, or we'd bring it to council if we had to do that.
Okay, can you let me know how much those contracts are?
I can, but we haven't used them yet because with the weather turned and that kind of thing, we're going to use them in the fall, and we've discussed it. But what we'll do is, yeah, I can check, get you the information, but nothing would go over $15,000. It can't.
Okay, but as individual, these would be let as individual contracts, so it wouldn't go over 15.
Correct. Yes. With one contractor. That's right. 15,000.
Right. Okay.
So if whatever contractor had flat, Broughton had a street sweeper, we contract with them up to $15,000 is all we could do.
Okay. I'd just like to maybe talk more about these two contracts.
Sure. I can get you probably the service agreement is probably what we've used for that. And I can get you a copy of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman, Director Mahoney, in your opinion, once we get the two new sweepers in our inventory, in our use, will our reliance or need for outside contractors be reduced?
Well, yes, but I mean, it's going to take time to get us spelled up to, I think, where we really should be. And there's other issues coming down the pike with the EPA and how they're going to react to a little bit of what Alderman Simpson was talking about in some of these areas. You know, effective and aggressive sweeping program, we may be set on some guidelines that are even above what we're shooting for right now. So it's going to take a combination. I think we're always going to have to maintain a street sweeping operation within the city and public works, and we're probably going to have to continue to enhance that. And then we're probably going to have to look at contractual services. It doesn't make sense probably to have, 6 to 8 street sweepers or 8 to 10 street sweepers, and you have to have with those a follow-up truck usually, depending. You're going to have to maintain those year-round. It probably makes more sense to bump up during the fall when we're probably going to be more aggressive in the street sweeping, and the spring probably as well. And then during the off-season, probably not have as many. So that's why it makes more sense probably to look at the possibility of doing some contracting during those peak periods.
And you want to retain the capacity to ramp up the sweeping if you need to with private contractors? Is that part of your thinking?
Well, yeah, well, like anything, I mean, we have contractual services all over the place with the city of Springfield and Public Works. I mean, it's no different than when we do with our snow operation, no different when we do, obviously with our overlay and our sidewalk program. We cannot maintain a workforce that would take care of these, peak periods. It just doesn't make sense. It's just not practical to do that.
Thank you, Director. Alderman Lesko, do you have?
Yes. Director, now with the addition of these two new Pelicans, how many total street sweepers will we have?
It'll be 4 with those additional 2. We have the 2 that are 2006 models, and generally speaking, we look at, they say the estimate is 6 to 7 years or so on the lifespan of a sweeper. Ours obviously are past that, so we're having a lot of issues with them as far as keeping them on the street, keeping them functioning. So our thought is that we're going to purchase these new ones and probably we'll be looking at, as funds permit, adding 2 more and continue to ramp that up.
But we have enough operators on the payroll to pretty much...
Yes, but at times what we do, a lot of times in the spring when it starts to get busier again, we'll bring in, like this year, we have our budgeted, the temporary budget, where we're able to go in. Sometimes we get a bricklayer, we get a couple operators that would assist in this case if it was sweepers where we needed them wherever, we pull in 2 more operators. Also to adjust for, we always have somebody usually on workman's comp or they're out for this or that reason. So during the busy period, spring to winter, or spring to fall, I'm sorry, we probably would be looking some temporary help.
Okay. But your intent, from what I understand, or what I'm getting from your intent, is for our employees to use them, but in a situation where it's an emergency or busy, then that's when you would reach out to contractual service.
Well, the contractors would have their own sweepers too. That's the other part of it. So part of it is, I mean, if we go out and get a new sweeper, it's not cheap. Obviously, you say you're 2 for $300,000+,
Right.
$180 a piece. So that's another part of it, and maintaining those as well.
Right. And they would
the
use
operator,
those.
and if you're going to pull a full-time operator, and you're going to have probably truck driver labor and trucks.
Follow truck, yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion? There's a motion and a second for debate. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-468 is a resolution authorizing execution of a letter of intent with the state of Illinois for traffic signal upgrades on Wabash Avenue at West White Oaks Drive and Robbins Road for the Office of Public Works.
With the consent?
Second.
There's a motion and a second for consent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-469 is an ordinance authorizing execution of an agreement with Hanson Professional Services Incorporated for preliminary engineering services for the Stanford Avenue extension from 11th Street to Fox Bridge Road in an amount not to exceed $399,015 for the Office of Public Works.
With the consent?
Second.
There's a motion and a second for consent. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-470 is a resolution notifying the state of Illinois that the city may spend $399,015 of its allotted motor fuel tax funds for preliminary engineering services for the extension of Stanford Avenue from 11th Street to Fox Bridge Road.
Move the consent?
Second.
Motion and a second for consent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes.
2014-471 is an ordinance authorizing execution of an intergovernmental cooperation agreement between the City of Springfield, Illinois and the Sangamon County, Illinois Board of Health for animal control officer services within the city limits of Springfield and authorizing a payment in an amount not to exceed $231,417 from March 1st, 2014 through February 28th, 2015 for the Office of Budget and Management.
Move the consent?
There's a motion and a second for consent. Discussion? Alderman Simpson?
Mr. McCarty, this bill is past due, obviously.
I'm sorry, I
This
didn't
bill
hear.
is obviously past due.
Past due. Well, all I can say is we just got it from the county.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So then they'll be expecting,
They certainly would like to get payment pretty soon.
I'm sure.
But, of course, we indicated that we have to run it through our process with the city council, and that as soon as that's complete, we'll be issuing the payment.
so this amount or an amount similar to this will become due again beginning March 1st, 2015?
For services in the next fiscal year, that is correct. Now, we have spoken with them, and we hope to get their bill a little sooner in the coming fiscal year. And as soon as we get it, whenever that time comes, we will bring it to the city council, as we always have.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Cameron?
Yeah, Director, we agreed to this amount in advance, correct? And this was...
We have, if you'll remember, over the last few years, we have been in discussions with the county on changes to what the city, and not just the city of Springfield, but other municipalities around the county, pay to Sangamon County for these services, and you'll see it again in the next ordinance with regards to boarding, the same issue. And I want to get into a lot of history here, but if you go way back to when this was done, I believe in the early 2000s, there was a set amount of around $112,000, $115,000 with annual CPI increases on top of that. And the county did a study a few years ago and realized from that they were severely undercharging, in their opinion, for the services. So they started engaging the city of Springfield and other municipalities to come up with a change to that charge matrix. And what you see before you and what you will see before you in the coming year is the result of those negotiations back and forth. Originally, the county wanted more than $500,000 from the city. And of course, that concerned us, so we went back and had a lot of meetings with Jim Stone and some of the others, and eventually came to an agreement, and that's what these charges are based upon.
Okay, that answers the question. Thank you.
Any further discussion? There's a motion and a second for consent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes.
2014-472 is an ordinance authorizing execution of an intergovernmental cooperation agreement between the City of Springfield, Illinois and Sangamon County, Illinois Board of Health for boarding of animals impounded within the city limits of the City of Springfield, and authorizing payment in an amount not to exceed $72,510 from March 1st, 2014 through February 28th, 2015 for the Office of Budget and Management.
Move to consent.
Second.
Motion and a second for consent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it. Motion passes.
2014-473 is an ordinance authorizing execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Board of Education of the Springfield School District 186 regarding school safety officers from January 6, 2015 through June 2, 2015.
Move to consent.
Second.
Motion and a second for consent. Any discussion?
Just one question. I didn't see, is there an amount in here that the school district is paying the city?
Alderman, the school board,
Will you state your name and position?
Commander Scarlett, Springfield Police.
Thank you.
The school board has their meeting on the Monday, January 5th, regarding whether to pass this or not. Right now, for the remainder, or for the remainder of the school year, which is 21 weeks, we're looking at $115,000 roughly in revenue that the city will benefit from.
Through the end of the school year?
That is correct.
And starting when?
January 6th through June 2nd, I believe is the date.
Okay. Is that about the same? I mean, we did this before in prior years. Is that about the same rate that we were getting from the school district for doing this before?
We're charging them or billing them the same rate with the exception of the pension costs for the officers.
So they were paying the pension costs for the officers before, but under this current agreement they wouldn't be?
That is correct.
Do you know what that amount comes out to?
I happen to have that. I believe if we were to charge them for an entire school year, which is 39 weeks, for 3 officers, the pension cost is roughly $54,000.
And this is about half that period. The period we're talking about here is about half that.
That's correct, 21 weeks.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion? There's a motion and a second for consent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The motion passes. We have reached the final ordinance for immediate review. Is there any unfinished business? Item 7 on the agenda. Any old business? Is there any new business? Just a point of information, the budget hearings have been finalized again, and the first budget hearing will be January 7th, which will be treasurer, office clerk, city council, library, and economic development. The second of 5 budget hearings will be Tuesday, January 13th, the Convention Center, Human Resources and Public Works. The next budget hearing will be Thursday, January 15th, City Water, Light, and Power. The fourth budget hearing will be Tuesday, January 20th, Police and Fire. And the final budget hearing, and this is a change from what was the case a few days ago, the final budget hearing will be Thursday, January 22nd, and that'll be Mayor and Office of Budget and Management. Any other new business? Are there any requests from citizens to address the committee? Then we will entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/20, Section 2, paren C, close paren 11, close paren, of the Illinois Open Meetings Act pertaining to pending litigation.
So moved. Second.
First and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes.
Move to reconvene.
There's a motion and a second to reconvene. It's now 7:07 p.m., December 30th. Madam Clerk, will you read the caption for the 2014-458?
Yes, I will. 2014-458 is an ordinance approving an agreement with Jake Narup and Mead PC for Randall A. Mead to provide legal services regarding Sangamon County Court Case Number 2008 L176, Mary Yarborough individually and as special administrator of the estate of Eric Jones versus City Water, Light and Power and the City of Springfield, and authorizing a payment for an amount not to exceed $50,000.
Move to consent.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for consent. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it.
2014-459 is an ordinance authorizing an agreement with the Knoll Law Office, LLC, for legal services regarding Sangamon County Court Case Number 2013 MR 341, Calvin Christian III versus City of Springfield et al., and authorizing payment for an amount not to exceed $42,000.
Move to consent.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for consent.
Yep.
Any discussion?
Yeah, there's an amendment to correct a clerical error. We used the name and caption of a case which has already been settled, and the amendment refers to the pending federal case of the same name.
Move to accept proposed amendment number 1.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to accept proposed amendment number 1. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have
Madam
it.
Chairman, could you please clerk, record me as voting present on this?
Now we need it.
Now, any discussion on the ordinance as amended?
I just had one.
Alderman Dove?
Is this, I saw in the ordinance itself, it goes back to the representation agreement that we had with them for the last time that they were representing the city. That's supposed to be in here? Because it references that Sangamon County case as well.
Yeah, it's in all places where the Sangamon County case is referred to, it's going to be changed to the pending federal case.
So even though the representation agreement was signed in May of 2013?
I'm not following in the draft where that...
Do we have a new representation agreement? Maybe as well.
Yeah, that's what I just didn't know, because right now it's attached to this one, and if it's not the right...
Okay, I will change that, and I will have the representation agreement proper when attached next time.
Thanks.
Do we need to keep it on debate then for that purpose, or?
That's a good point. If we put it on debate, and then I can make the proper corrections next time.
I'll change my motion to a debate.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for the debate agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it.
I'd like to be recorded as voting present on this one.
So noted. Is there any further business for the committee of the whole? If not, a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Adjourn.
Page 4.
Happy New Year, everybody. You too.